All right. Why in chai squeeze sinisita goes Adeline in Tatupa with Tali can leave my in Miami in Tatupa. Hi, I'm LaRae Wiley, and Adeline was my great grandmother, and I'm really happy to just share some memories about her with you. I didn't know very much about Adeline's life growing up. I just knew that she was from the Arrow Lakes, and that she was my great grandmother. And I think that I learned about her earlier life when I had talked to you and from Shelley, learned more about that. That she had a husband who was murdered, and there was a trial, and these things. And it made me really sad that she had to go through that. And I realized how little I knew about her. Just that I was so, proud that I got to know her, happy that I got to spend time with her when I was young. But I really didn't know that much about her life till recently. Like, oh my gosh, she lived to be 106. That means that, she was there before settlers and had this life before that. And then also lived during when I was small and computers and, all sorts of things. So she saw so much. I think even as a child, I just felt her strength, that she had survived, that she had gone on in the face of all that change and had adapted and lived and created family and was still connected to her culture and her language. And I just feel like it was her strength that I really could feel when I was with her. One of my first memories of Adeline is that she had her braids. She always wore her hair in braids, either one braid or two braids, and she always had her hair that way. And she always had a kerchief. She always wore a kerchief on her cap whenever I saw her. So I always associate, when I see that, it's like, oh yeah, that's my great grandma. And she always had that kerchief on her head. And I remember being little, and it's really funny because like my granddaughter will come up to me and grab my skin on my hand, and wow, we're really old and wrinkly, and it's like, yeah. And I remember seeing Adeline, we were visiting, and I remember doing that to her hand and just picking, and she would say, oh man, you got lots of chicks, because there were 5 of us kids, and when my dad and mom would bring us to visit. I remember one time I asked her, because we'd been studying Native Americans in history. I was like at 4th grade, and I said, Mom, ask her if she ever knew of Chief Joseph, and so my mom asked her, and I was all excited, and she was like, well, one time I remember we were on horseback and we were traveling. I remember seeing him from afar on a horse. And I was so excited, and I went back to school and like, my great grandma saw Chief Joseph, and was all excited. Nice. Oh yeah, this is a story that my dad told us when we were growing up. He was like, they lived in Chihuahua, and she was living with them, with my grandma and my Auntie Gail, my dad, and they had to be at school in the morning, but it was a winter night, and she was in the kitchen, and she had her cane, her staff, and she was singing all night long. And they were like, Grandma, please go to sleep, Grandma. We have school in the morning, Grandma. But then they didn't realize that she was doing her winter dance, and she was singing for her family and for their health and everything. And I thought that was really something, because that tradition of the winter dance has come back to our family, and I think she was the last person who did that, and then we were able to bring it back to our family. So that was really special and funny memory that he had of Grandma. there's lots of folks still do the winter dance. And you pray for the coming year, and you sing, and come together and have a meal. And it's a spiritual gathering. Yeah, it's a spiritual gathering. And before, Native Americans couldn't practice their religion, so it was outlawed. And it was very kind of underground, and now it's coming out more. And I know George Flett, he was one of the people, he told me one time he really wanted to get that awareness of winter dances and our spirituality out there, that we weren't captive to those old laws anymore, and that in order for people to learn, that we needed to bring those ceremonies out, and so that everyone could know that we practice this way, and these are our ceremonies. And I don't know, since I've been relearning my culture and my language, it's been a powerful piece of that connection to my grandmother. I was so lucky because I met Francis Kaluuya and Wiley, and they kind of took me in. And our first winter dance, Chris and I, we went to Francis's winter dance in Usk. And it was very powerful for me, and I just felt so connected and so grateful to have that opportunity to go. And we were coming home from the winter dance, and we drove over the mountains, Chewelah Peak, and in the middle of the night, because it ended at 1 a.m, and it was snowing. And then all of these the Spepelina, the snowshoe rabbits, they were guiding us all the way home, because in my family the winter dance has been lost. But since that time, I was able to ask Francis for help. I was able to ask Barry Moses for help, and he helped me to bring the winter dance back to my family. And it's been amazing to watch my grandchildren just praying and singing and jumping and know that ceremony is back into our family. Shelley really helped me with Sulu Stew Berry. We did a trip last winter and went around to different sites in our territory, and it was very emotional. Every time I go up to the Arrow Lakes, I feel the ancestors there. And the first time Chris and I went up, I felt my body just vibrating with the power of the land and the ancestors, and it was almost overwhelming. I was just crying and I couldn't really understand why, but then it was oh yeah, this is the ancestors. I'm part of this land, this is my homeland. Mm-hmm. And, but it's always very emotional. When I decided to go on this journey with Preset and Sulu Stew and go to where Jim was murdered, it was a very emotional decision for me. When I was growing up, I knew that I was Arrow Lakes. I knew Adeline. I knew my grandmother. But when I was, 13, Adeline passed away first, and then my auntie was murdered. My grandmother. Okay, Adeline passed away. And then my grandmother passed away, and then my Auntie Gail was murdered, and within a year. And that really broke my dad. He was so sad. And so our family lost a lot of connections to Inchelium and to extended family. And it's been part of my life's journey to reconnect and make those connections possible for my grandkids and their kids going forward. So when Shelley asked me to go with her and to bring my daughter was with me, and it was, I was scared. I didn't know if I was going to be able to hold it together, and not cry every stop that we went. And but it was beautiful. It was beautiful to be in my traditional territory, to see the land, to be there with my daughter and have that connection with her. Just layers upon layers of beauty and connection and grief. Just thinking about all that we lost, and just what a struggle it's been to reconnect and to bring back things. When Adeline passed, it was her funeral was in Inchelium, so we went up to Inchelium, and I just remember, there was the wake, and at the wake, I remember my sister and I, we were kind of joking around and visiting, and then all of a sudden we hear this wailing, and it was these elderly women who were lined up, and it was their job. They were wailers at the funeral, and it was their job to kind of keep people in line and make sure that we didn't have too much fun. Remember why we're here, right? We're here to remember Adeline. We're here to, celebrate her life, but we also need to be respectful and kind of, keep it down. And but I just remember my sister Renee and we just jumped because they were very loud, and it was kind of shocking, and oh, right, that's right, we're here for great grandma. And we just laughed, and we're like, oh my gosh, we need to settle down and be respectful. And it was one of the last times that I heard people wailing at funerals. And I think just having that experience, just being at her funeral, experiencing that, and being a part of the community in that sense was, it was scary, but it was really good. And it was a way to grieve together over the loss of Adeline. I didn't hear the language growing up. I lived off the reservation, and I heard my great-grandmother's kind of broken English, right? Her accent and things like that, but I never heard anyone speak the language. And so as an adult, when I learned that, I knew that my great uncle Joe spoke, and that my grandmother spoke, and my great grandmother spoke the language, but I never heard it. They never spoke it around us. And so when my uncle Joe passed away, I went to his funeral, and a man said, this man was a fluent speaker, and he's one of the few we have left, and now he's gone, and who's going to learn our language? Who's going to carry on our languages? And I've been teaching for a while in Chihuahua, and I was starting to reconnect with my friends Francis and Wiley, and just connecting to the native side of my family. And so I thought, well, I don't know much about it, but maybe I can help. Maybe I can learn our language, And Chris was a Spanish teacher. And so I thought, well, gosh, he learned Spanish. Maybe I can probably learn my language, and help and teach. So I went and spent the summer with Pauline Flett on the Spokane Reservation and started learning Salish. And I fell in love with the language when I was working with Pauline. Just the sound of it, the way it flowed, the way it just connected me to my people. Even though it's not my language, it's the Spokane language, it's a sister language. So I stayed and I helped for 3 years teaching, learning the language there on the Spokane Reservation, and teaching in the Head Start and the kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And I loved it. And then I had the opportunity to learn my grandma Adeline's language on the Colville Res. And so I jumped at the chance and got an apprentice position and went to the Omak Language House and connected with Samtitsa. And I loved learning the language. I loved how it sounded. And so I connected with Samtitsa, and Chris and we decided we wanted to make some curriculum for people to learn and have it be a faster way to learn and a way to learn from a fluent elder. So we recorded. We used to spend hours recording Samtitsa and made these books so that people could hear the language and then learn from a fluent elder. When our daughter was pregnant with our first granddaughter, she wanted to move back and go to nursing school in Spokane. She wanted us to help her with the baby, so I said yes. And so we moved back to Spokane and we helped her with childcare while she went to school. And then I decided, well, I think we should just speak the language to her so that she'll always have that, because it's been a struggle for me to reconnect with everything. Right. So I decided that we just speak in Kailuchin to her, in Selkchin. And so we did that, and she was learning, and then I thought, well, she's going to need some friends, right? She's going to need other kids. So then we opened up a little preschool in my sister's basement. And so those 4 little girls, we just spent all day in the language. I was speaking to them, and we thought, this could work. And I learned a lot and educated myself about the different efforts going on in the world to revitalize languages. And when I was with the tribe, we'd gone over and seen some immersion schools in Montana, the Blackfoot Immersion School, and then in Kusum school. And so I thought, well, they're doing it and they're having success, and maybe we should start a little immersion school. We got together and we created a nonprofit, Salish School of Spokane. And so we've been going for 12 years now. And this year we have 35 students from 3 years old up to 7th grade. And it's been a wonderful journey. Yeah, and we have over 50 adults learning language, doing night classes or doing on-the-job training and getting training during the day. So, yeah. I feel like our language, because so much was taken from us, that our language has a lot of power behind it. It touches every part of you when you start speaking your language. And it brings up these hurts and some trauma with it. And I didn't realize that when I first started on my language journey, because I didn't know anything about my language. I'd been cut off from the culture, and so I didn't really recognize all these pieces that come with the language. And so at first I struggled with, why are people getting so upset that we're creating these materials and teaching the language, and right? But because it's all tied up with that past trauma and with the just all the loss, right? And so that's really been a learning journey for me. But I still feel like I want people to learn our language. And for me, I don't care if you're not Indigenous. Because when you learn someone else's language, there's a respect there. There's, even if, like you talked about, if I'm going to go to Paris, I'm going to learn French and be respectful of that, and right, and try and show that respect. I feel like that's true with our language as well. I think it'd be awesome if people learn how to say white, hello, and say Ninawi Seshwikinchin, I'll see you again later. Just those kinds of things are a show of respect. For me, that's how I feel about it. And I know that the more people that can help bring back our language, it's going to just get stronger, right? And we need allies. We need people to help. And that's always been kind of my outlook. It is a sensitive issue. But I feel like it's also respectful to learn someone else's language, and to show that respect. I know that I know that I live on Spokane traditional territory here in Spokane. Spokane is a Salish word, Spokane, right? And so I know that I'm respectful of this place. I'm respectful of people. I'm grateful to be here, right? And it kind of lends itself to a different way of thinking about place, right? I know that there were people here before me, and that they were using this land in ways that are different than we are using this land now, right? And I think that's a really powerful way to look at the land, where we are, and how we interact with the land and with the people who are tied to this place, right? And I feel that way about Revelstoke. When I went to Galena Bay, it was so powerful and so strong. I could feel my great-grandmother's grief, and it was real, and it was true, and it was coming up from the land into me, and it was really powerful. And that's how the land is. And I think the language and the land are connected, and that you can be an ally and you can learn our language and do it in a way that's respectful. I'd like to see more connections with Arrow Lakes people and folks in Revelstoke or in our traditional territories. I think knowing the history of where you live is important, because it becomes part of you. Where you live is part of you and your community. And so knowing the past and knowing that there were families here, there were people here, is an important part of reconciliation. And it's an important part of understanding where you live. I think place is really important. And the land has such power, and I think it carries the memories. It holds the memories of my grandmother, right?